Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this Friday afternoon. A little bit tired, had a wonderful night last night. Feeling a little down, I will admit that. Have not been feeling my best recently, but that's whatever, because you want to know what makes me feel good? Talking about basketball. That's exactly what makes me feel good, and I'm sure that makes everyone else feel great everyone who's tuning into this podcast as well. So we're gonna go ahead and start talking. The first segment that we're going to get into is we're going to once again talk about the possibility of Giannis Antetokounmpo getting traded. Now, there were more reports going out yesterday, and I was talking about those reports. But now what I'm going to answer is it actually realistic, and is it not just rumors? So, because obviously Giannis getting traded, that is some blockbuster news that nobody ever really expects, And no one really thinks it's that plausible to do. So that's what the first segment is going to be about. Then in the second segment, we're going to focus on another player who ended up getting injured a few days ago, Paolo Banchero. We're going to talk about his injury, what that could mean for the Orlando Magic. It's not a good day to be a Magic fan, that I can tell you. And then in the third segment, we're going to talk about Victor Wembanyama and his bounce-back game. We all know that he dropped the career low against Chet Holmgren the other day, but he, of course, inevitably ended up bouncing back and started playing very well in the matchup against the Utah Jazz. And I know what you guys are going to say. Oh, it's the Jazz, but it doesn't matter because they're terrible. But regardless, still a very dominant performance coming in from Victor. And then after that, we're going to look at the NBA games that went down yesterday. Of course, I got 2 wrong once again. I am never allowed to get all of them right. I am always forced to get at least 2 wrong. And that's what we're going to discuss. So with that out of the way, I just wanted to say before I get into the first segment that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show. Whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, whether you guys have anything that you're dying to share, we are all ears. And if you really want your comment or question to get noticed, I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Or you can use the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way as well. So with that out of the way, however, let's go right ahead and talk about the first segment, which is going to be about Giannis Antetokounmpo and the possibility of him getting traded. So, as I said before, it was incredibly shocking, but right now the Milwaukee Bucks are not off to a very good start. Like, they're actually off to one of the worst starts in the entirety of the Eastern Conference. And I fully blame Doc Rivers for all of this. Doc Rivers is one of the worst coaches in NBA history. And he, literally one of the worst coaches with the championship ring. I have no idea why on earth they decided to acquire him and replace him with replace Adrian Griffin for Doc Rivers. I have no idea why. Doc Rivers didn't even know why they were doing that, but he cannot coach a team to save his life. And neither can Darvin Ham, and they're both on the Milwaukee Bucks, and they're both coaching the Milwaukee Bucks, literally just making the team worse right before our very eyes. Now, it has not been going, aside from the first win of the season that they got, literally the first game that they played, every other game that they played ended up being a loss. They're starting out the season 1-4 because they played the Grizzlies the other night, and they ended up losing in a blowout. I'm never picking the Bucks to win a game ever again. I'm never picking them to win a game ever again. I cannot trust this team. I cannot trust Doc Rivers. It's just I don't know why I was in hindsight, I guess it It was pretty ignorant. But at the time, I really thought that Giannis and Dame would be able to pull out and pull through against the Grizzlies, but they didn't. So I'm never picking them to win a game ever again, as long as Doc Rivers is their coach. And I just can't. I don't understand. Ever since Doc Rivers took over the job, his record is 20-27. Like, that is terrible. When you have Giannis Antetokounmpo in his prime and Damian Lillard at playing phenomenal basketball like he is, that is, he did not play well last night, but that is a serious problem. And since, like, it's just, I can't. I don't know. I really don't know. And it's gotten so bad for the Bucks that teams are circling and hopeful that that they collapse and Giannis Antetokounmpo could get traded. A possibility that he's even teased multiple times over the years. And executives are thinking that the trade could happen in season with either the Miami Heat, the Brooklyn Nets, or the Oklahoma City Thunder, which would be an absolute cheat code if OKC ended up getting Giannis Antetokounmpo. That would be such a cheat code. And, quote, I wouldn't be surprised if it happened by the trade deadline, said a top executive of a team that could be in the mix. Now, is it realistic? Is all of this possible, or is everyone just being optimistic and hopeful? Let's find out. So, obviously, a trade that sends Giannis to the Heat is like, it sounds incredibly hypothetical, and it sounds something that is made up, and it makes total sense why people are skeptical about it. Yet, there have been multiple blockbuster trades made over the years that seem too ridiculous to have actually happened. The most recent episode of It's Too Good to Be True saw the Knicks make a trade for all-star big man Karl Anthony Towns, who had been linked to them for years. New York also swung a miraculous trade for Mikal Bridges in a deal that seemed to bring it was almost as if they were generating a 2K roster. That's how ridiculous it was. No one really expected Mikal. I did not expect them to be able to get Karl Anthony Towns after landing Mikal Bridges and losing all of their draft picks. I did not expect that. And that being said, there is a distinct possibility that Giannis Antetokounmpo could be traded, and his own teammate Damian Lillard is just one of the few stars to have forced their way off a team. And as we know, and as I said before, if Giannis Antetokounmpo were to get traded, then Damian Lillard would literally just be back in square one, just in the Eastern Conference, which is definitely not the best. That's very, very unlucky. I mean, he gets a situation in Milwaukee where he thinks he's going to compete for a championship, and now all of a sudden Doc Rivers is your coach. That is just the ultimate. That's the ultimate death sentence, in my opinion. I cannot stand Doc Rivers. I cannot stand Darvin Ham. I don't understand how they have head coaching jobs, but that is whatever. I could probably be a better coach than them. In my opinion, I think I could be a better coach than them, and I would definitely be able to lead the Bucks to at least 2 wins so far in this season. But that being said, there is a distinct possibility that Antetokounmpo could be traded, which is not good. Bradley Beal, he found himself with the Phoenix Suns after deciding not to be a part of the rebuild with the Wizards. Kevin Durant is only with the Suns because he no longer wanted to play on the Brooklyn Nets. And prior to that, James Harden wound up with the 76ers after deciding the Nets weren't for him. At the same time, Ben Simmons was trying to escape Philly, landing in Brooklyn. So those were the crazy blockbuster moves and blockbuster trades that happened recently, and there's ample evidence that Antetokounmpo could end up doing the same, forcing his way out. What's doubtful is that the Bucks would trade him to a contender. A 2-time MVP and former Defensive Player of the Year is still in his prime, and for a consensus top 10 player, in my opinion, top 2 player, anyone calling up Milwaukee better be prepared to offer up the king's ransom for this guy. That is a lot that you guys have to spend on just to get Giannis Antetokounmpo. And a team that the Bucks will want to defeat in the playoffs might have to give up more than that. So that's just the possibilities going in and like what teams would most likely have to trade for. And what would a deal look like? So if Milwaukee was to strike a deal with, let's say, Miami, the headlining player would depend on the timing of the deal because Giannis Antetokounmpo signed a 3-year contract extension with the Bucks in 2023. His salary will see a sharp increase next season, and in addition to that, Milwaukee is above the second apron. So they can't really accept more salary than they send out in a trade or aggregates contracts. Next offseason, they're projected to be under the first apron, which eases money of a trade restrictions and they're currently subject to. The trade restrictions that they're currently subjected to. And if they were to strike a trade in season, it would have to be centered around Bam Adebayo or Tyler Hero because Jimmy Butler makes about $11,000 more than Antetokounmpo, placing him just out of their range in order to trade. However, if Butler is the apple of their eye, then they could wait until next offseason when he becomes a free agent and agree to sign and trade for the 35-year-old. Theoretically, an exchange would be simple in many ways given that both Antetokounmpo and Butler are two-way playmakers. So, now, about that trade package that I was talking about with Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. Let me just go ahead and refresh this because, of course the Wi-Fi here wants to be absolutely phenomenal when I'm doing this. Anyways, hold on. Let's move it down. Oh my God. Okay. So a deal with Adebayo and Tyler Hero is obviously that's probably going to be the most likely package that they'll be able to get, and Bam is a perennial defensive player of the year, not exactly the defensive player of the year, but he's still pretty solid, and he's his story is similar to Antetokounmpo. Now of course Adebayo is more of a true big man than Giannis, and just an incredible and is incredibly mobile as well. He can defend the perimeter rather well while also being able to defend the big men just as well. Nonetheless, with Brook Lopez becoming a free agent next offseason, they could have a hole to fill in the center position anyway. And how long Rivers remains the Bucks head coach remains to be seen. However, his experience coaching Kevin Garnett with the Boston Celtics could benefit Bam Adebayo's growth. Maybe not. I don't think it's going to matter in the hindsight because Doc Rivers is just not a good coach. Hero saves the day with Chris Middleton's falling victim to the father time. Excuse me, I just could not read for a second. And since Middleton, he's going to be rather old. So adding somebody like Tyler Hero, a young player, is very, very good for the Milwaukee Bucks because I already said before that a big problem with their roster is age. And Middleton is most likely going to be under contract next season with $34 million, especially in a player option for 2025, 2026. Nonetheless, Hero would be a third or second option that Milwaukee could count on a bit more than Chris Middleton. And on top of that, his ability off ball should also complement Adebayo, but also Damian Lillard, who, if he decides to remain on Milwaukee. And if Adebayo becomes a pretty solid option, then who knows? Maybe Hero could also be that solid option. So that's the most realistic trade that could happen in season and the most realistic thing that could happen outside of this season. So that's all that I have in this segment. And now we're going to go ahead to go into the second segment where I talk about Paolo Banchero and his injury. So I'll be right back after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to be talking about Paolo Banchero and his injury and exactly what this could mean for the Orlando Magic moving forward. So before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, or anything that you've just been dying to share. We are all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive. You could also use the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment. That is gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way as well. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about this rather unfortunate news that I've ended up finding out after last night and ended up confirming after last night as well. And that is the unfortunate injury to Paolo Banchero. As you know, I am a big fan of Paolo Banchero. I think he is one of the league's most underrated players in the NBA. He has incredible talents. He has incredible scoring ability. He has great rebounding. He has great facilitating as well. If I were to give him some sort of comparison to like a player, I couldn't really give one. So that would mean that he's, and what I mean by that is I would actually pick two players that would best resemble his games. He's like a hybrid of Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James, in my opinion. He's able to use his size to his advantage to be able to get easy looks inside, and he also has a very good shot creation and shot tendency. Like, his mid-range game is very, very strong, especially considering now in today's NBA where it's like not many people really take that many mid-ranges. Again, he almost had a 50-point triple-double in one of the most recent games that he ended up playing. However, the Orlando Magic's luck ended up running out. So after one of the best weeks in this man's young career, he's going to be sidelined indefinitely. This came from Shams Charania in a tweet saying, Orlando Magic superstar Paolo Banchero has been diagnosed with a torn right oblique and is sidelined indefinitely, sources tell ESPN. He will be reevaluated in 4 to 6 weeks, and return to play will be based on how he responds to treatment, which again, this is not ideal for the Orlando Magic. If you want to remain competing in the Eastern Conference, you sort of have to have a strong start, so that way you don't have to worry about playing in these play-in games. And, I mean, the gap between the 7th seed, the gap between the 8th seed, the 9th seed, and the 10th seed was really big in terms of wins. And you kind of don't want to put your team in a scenario where you have to play more games, as opposed to being in the playoffs where your playoff spot is already secured. And this happened on Monday. Banchero, he was having one of his best games of his career, putting up 50 points, 13 rebounds, and 9 assists in a win over the Pacers. He followed that up with 31 points on Wednesday's his loss. He lost 102-99 to the Chicago Bulls when Banchero suffered a torn oblique in the final quarter of the game. Not coincidentally, he shot 2 for 7 in the fourth after starting the game 10 for 15, which is Like, I mean, starting 10 for 15 is absolutely phenomenal. And when you go 2 for 7, obviously they're like after going 10 for 15, there's something up. Now, the Magic are they're going to be without their leading scorer, 29 points per game. That's how much he averages, which is incredible. Leading passer, 5.6 assists, which again is very impressive, and it's probably going to get better. And second leading rebounder as well, 8.8 rebounds for at least 4 or even 6 weeks. And Banchero, he's been the Orlando Magic's main source of free throw attempts, attempting 42% of the team's attempts, more than 3 times as many as the closest guy next on the roster, which is Wendell Carter Jr. So this means that Orlando is going to have to find offense in someone else, somewhere else, and with someone else. That's the only way that they're going to be able to succeed and move forward. And the answer to this, because I don't think, unlike the Raptors, I don't think the Orlando Magic should just throw the season away completely. I don't think they should try and encourage tanking, because their roster it's much better than what it was last season. They just need to find a new spark on the offense, and I think that new spark is going to have to be Franz Wagner. They recently signed him to a huge extension in the offseason, and he's also been second in scoring, I believe, he's averaging nearly 20 points per game for the Magic just last season. And though he's battling an illness right now, it could mean additional minutes for the lottery pick as Jet Howard. So, that's just another player that the Orlando Magic are probably going to have to rely on in the future. Now he has sparingly so far, but might have to be a more scoring option upside for the Orlando Magic's reserve. But the player who may see the biggest uptick in his playing time and his usage rate is another second-year player, Anthony Black. He's a guard. And while Jonathan Isaac is likely going to slide into Banchero's starting position, in the forward spot, Black represents a lot more of an offensive prowess, right? So, we do know if you guys don't know anything about Jonathan Isaac is an incredible defender. And that's really, the main focus of his game, defense. But half of the game, I always say defense is half the game, but the other half of the game is also being able to score. And that is going to be something that the Orlando Magic are going to have to find, and it's not really clear cut who the next guy up is going to be. And Anthony Black, as I mentioned before, he's second on the team with 21 assists, and he's taking shots off the dribble twice as often as last season. So, this was a crushing loss for Orlando that is looking to build off of last season's number 5 seed that they ended up getting in the Eastern Conference last year. There's no guaranteed whether or not Paolo Banchero is going to be back soon, even after his injury is reevaluated. Because, again, it's all in due to how he responds to treatment as well. And the team has to find new ways to score anyway, because I don't really think that relying just on Paolo is going to end up, taking you far. For a player who was taking a giant step forward, this injury is just really not good, and it's a big step back on not just the Orlando season here and right now, but also Paolo Banchero's career. So that's all that I really have for this second segment, and I hope that Paolo Banchero ends up getting better. Given how a lot of these players end up recovering pretty swell and pretty easily, aside from Joel Embiid and Paul George, I have hope. I do have hope for Paolo Banchero. I really, really, really want him to continue playing like how he's been playing, and I hope this injury doesn't hurt his. I hope his injury doesn't hurt him all that much going into the future of his career. So that's all that I have to say about this segment. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the third segment where I recap one of the games that happened last night, and that game is going to be the Spurs against the Utah Jazz. Victor Wembanyama played absolutely phenomenal in this matchup, and we're going to talk about that right after this short break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be focusing on Victor Wembanyama. The Spurs, they matched up against the Utah Jazz the other night. We're going to talk about that game as well and the results of that game. But again, primarily the focus is going to be on Victor Wembanyama and his amazing performance. And so just to recap what went down, the Spurs, they matched up against the Jazz. The Jazz played at home. However, the Spurs still ended up prevailing. They ended up winning 106-88 against the Jazz. So not a very solid performance coming in from the Jazz and the rest of their players. I can't really say much about this game. I mean, Lauri Markkanen, he did not end up playing in this matchup, so it makes total sense why they ended up losing. The leading scorer for the game was Colin Sexton, who came off the bench, 5 for 11 from the field with 16 points, along with 3 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 steals. He did end with 5 personal fouls, however. Keontae George, he was the second leading scorer for this game, 15 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds. However, he went 5 for 14 from the field and 1 for 9 from 3, which is not ideal in the slightest. And John Collins, he ended the game with 14 points, 6 of 13 from the field, and 0 for 1 from 3. And Kyle Filipowski, Filipowski, excuse me if I mess up that last name. He ended the game 12 points, 5 of 8 from the field. Now, the Utah Jazz as a team shot 39% from the field and 7 for 32 from 3, compared to the Spurs, who as a team shot 12 for 43 from 3, which is not much better in terms of percentages. They did shoot 27%, but it was good enough to beat the Jazz, especially with the team shooting 41% from the field. Chris Paul had a fantastic game tonight, 19 points, 8 for 13 from the field, 3 for 7 from 3, very efficient. Keldon Johnson, I apologize. 3 for 10 from the field, along with 13 points, 1 of 6 from 3, not that ideal. Jeremy Sochan ended the game with 11 points, 5 for 13 from the field, 1 of 4 from 3. So, again, like I said, the Spurs didn't really shoot that much better than the Utah Jazz, but the Utah Jazz are just, an incompetent team that it was like, it was all right for them to shoot like that and still end up winning by double digits. And Victor Wembanyama's performance. Now, he didn't really shoot the ball all that efficiently. He shot 9 for 20 from the field and 4 for 13 from 3. However, it was what he did everywhere else that was incredibly impressive. He had his second career 5x5 game. So what does that mean? It means that he recorded he recorded at least 5 stats in every single one of the 5 positive stats that you could record. So basically, at least 5 points, at least 5 rebounds, at least 5 assists, at least 5 steals, and at least 5 blocks. That's a 5x5. So his final box score performance was 25 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, 5 steals, and 5 blocks, which is incredible. Like, that is absolutely incredible. And keep in mind, he the game before that against the Thunder, it was arguably the worst game of his entire career, because he scored a career low against Chet Holmgren. But despite that, he made a resounding statement on Thursday with his second career 5x5 stat line. Again, this is the second time that Victor Wembanyama has done this. And he, finishing with 25 points is impressive. But then adding 5 steals along with that, along with 5 blocks and 7 assists, that is very, very impressive. I do gotta say. Now, I expected a little bit more rebounds than 9 from Victor, especially considering how he's 7'4", but I digress. And again, like I said, second career 5x5 after his incredible performance against the first time that he actually that he had a 5x5 game was when he was a rookie and he played against the Lakers on February 23rd, and he scored in that game. He scored 27 points, got 10 rebounds, 8 assists, 5 steals, and 5 blocks in that game against the Lakers. That was the first game where he had a 5x5. And Wembanyama, he has become the third player in NBA history with multiple 5x5 games, joining Hakeem Olajuwon, who has 6 in his career, and Andriy Kirilenko. Excuse me. I did not mess up that name, but it was just a little bit difficult to pronounce, I will say that. And Kirilenko, he ended with 3 of those in his career. So this is an incredibly exclusive club. And furthermore, he also joins Olajuwon as only the second player with multiple 5x5 games while scoring at least 25 points. So that is very, very good company when you are in the when you're in a similar conversation as Hakeem, right? A lot of people, they consider Hakeem one of the most underrated centers in the NBA. In fact, a lot of people have Hakeem Olajuwon in top 5 centers in NBA history, not just because of his footwork, but also because of his title run as the 6th seed with the Houston Rockets, not in 1994, but in 1995. And to that, I say yes, that run was very, very impressive, but Hakeem Olajuwon's career did not start in 95. In 94. It did not start there, right? Hakeem had several other playoff series where he was a much higher seed and he did not end up performing, and the team did not end up making it all the way to the finals or winning. And a lot of people, they tune that out when they think about the 90s, considering how Michael Jordan dominated in the 90s every single year. So a lot of people, they sort of try and tune that out. But again, the way I see it, Hakeem Olajuwon, yes, he's a very talented, a Hall of Fame center without a doubt. But a lot of people, they somewhat tend to overrate him because they think he's underrated, if that makes sense. Because again, he gets a lot of praise for that title run in 95. But like I said, his career did not start in 1994, and it did not end in 1995. There were still other things about Hakeem, and there were still other postseason appearances that ended up falling short. And a lot of people, they tend to forget about that because they only look to the 2 championships that he won when Michael Jordan wasn't dominating in the 90s. Obviously, because that year he sort of he retired from the NBA for a little bit, and then he ended up coming back. So, according to Elias Sports Bureau, Victor Wembanyama's performance marked only the 23rd 5x5 game in the NBA since the NBA began recording steals and blocks in 1974 and in 1973, 1974. And honestly, I think that if the NBA recorded those stats when Wilt Chamberlain played, he'd have I don't even know, maybe like 50 5x5 games. I have no idea, but I mean, like, that Wilt is a monster. He's crazy at putting up stats. I would not be surprised if he's had several games like that, putting up ridiculous numbers. It's just, the NBA didn't track it at the time. So being able to know whether or not Wilt Chamberlain actually did all those things, still up for debate. Not to mention also Bill Russell. That's another player that probably would have ended with a lot of those, but the stat wasn't recorded in their time. So who knows? But the only other active NBA players with 5x5 games include Nicholas Batum in 2013, Draymond Green in 2015, Anthony Davis in 2018, and Jusuf Nurkic in 2019. I remember when Jusuf Nurkic actually did that. It was like very, very, like nobody expected that from him. However, none of those players have been able to repeat at doing that until Victor Wembanyama, right? Like, there was no current player in the modern NBA that has been able to repeat that kind of stat line until Victor. So the hype around Victor is very, very real. And I don't think it's ever going to die out. And I mean, if he's able to win a championship, forget it. It's never going to die out. And like I said, this is like the first time that it's been repeated since Hakeem. Like, that is a very, very elite conversation to be a part of. Wemby was off to a slow start in the season, tallying only 20 points combined in the Spurs' 2 losses to the Thunder and the Rockets earlier in the week. And the historic outgoing on Thursday may have been the turning point for him to resume his exploits from his logic-defying first-year campaign that saw him become the first rookie to make an all-defensive first team besides countless of other firsts. Now, Wembanyama, he is not really getting carried away, telling the Express News that he needs to do more to help his team. He said, "It tells me I need to get my standards up when I don't get 5x5s because I am able to help my team in all those areas." He said after the game, "It should be a consistent thing. As I have said before, it is something we must have, something I must have more often to help my team." It's worth noting that the Spurs defeated an 0-5 Jazz team without its best player, who is dealing with back spasms, and the 2-3 Spurs' next host is going to be against the Timberwolves on Saturday. So he's going to go up against his French teammate and former Olympic teammate Rudy Gobert in this matchup. And I think, it's going to be really tough for Victor to sort of play well, because the way I see it, Rudy Gobert most likely knows all of his moves. Whether Rudy Gobert can guard all of his moves, that's a different question, I will say that, but I'm not entirely sure how good of a game Victor is going to have against the Timberwolves, knowing that Rudy Gobert is going to be guarding him. But we will see, because if Rudy Gobert does end up locking him down, that might be enough for him to win, or propel him to win the Defensive Player of the Year over Victor, even though I don't expect Victor Wembanyama to lose that award again to this guy. I really don't. But we'll have to see. So that's all that I have for the recap of this game. So now we're going to go ahead and continue with our NBA recap of the games that went down yesterday night. And right after this short break, we'll go ahead and continue. So be sure to stay tuned if you guys are interested.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we're going to be doing a nice recap of all of the games that went down yesterday, what the results of each of these games were, whether or not I was right, whether or not I was wrong. And as I alluded to before, I always need to get at least 2 picks wrong in order in these games and in my predictions. It's just, I don't know what it is, it's just the law. Like, I guess it's illegal for me to get every game right, because I ended up getting 2 wrong here again. I mentioned that I got the Bucks and the Grizzlies game wrong, so I might as well go ahead and talk about that. The Grizzlies ended up outscoring the Bucks 122-99. I was very, very reluctant to pick the Bucks, but I went ahead and I picked them anyway. Ja Morant ended with a 26-point triple-double, 10 rebounds, 14 assists, 26 points. And that was really, he was obviously the best player for the team for them. And aside from that, the rest of the starters ended up scoring in double figures, along with 2 players coming off of the bench. Santi Aldama, he's been a very, very good player for the Grizzlies, I do gotta say. He's been very solid. He went 7 for 14 from the field and ended with 19 points. Scottie Pippen Jr., 16 points, 5 for 8 from the field. Let me just see. Jalen Wells, 5 for 9 from the field, 16 points. Jaren Jackson Jr., 5 for 12 from the field, 13 points. Who else? Jake Laravia, 11 points, 3 for 6. Zach Edey, 5 for 9, 10 points. Very, very solid outing. Very nice performance coming in from everybody else on the Grizzlies squad. And really, and it's not like they even shot very well from 3. 8 for 28 they shot from 3. 28%. But they did shoot very good from the field, 52% from the field, compared to the Milwaukee Bucks, shooting 42% from the field and 21% from 3 on 9 for 42 3-point shooting. Now, they took a lot more shots. They took a lot more 3-pointers than the Grizzlies. They just were not falling tonight. Especially for Gary Trent Jr., who is supposed to be a very solid 3-point shooter. 4 for 12 from the field, 0 for 7 from 3, 9 points. Really, the only highlight of this game for the Milwaukee Bucks was, of course, Giannis Antetokounmpo. I expected a big game from Giannis, but he ended the game with 37 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists. And that was really it for the Milwaukee Bucks in terms of scoring. Brook Lopez, he ended the game with 12 points, 4 for 8 from the field. Bobby Portis ended with 5 for 14 from the field with 11 points and 1 of 5 from 3. But again, that is a rather lackluster performance coming in from the rest of these Bucks players. Damian Lillard laid an egg in this one. He was 1 for 12 from the field, 4 points, 0 for 6 from 3, 2 for 2 from the free throw line. Just a very, very bad performance coming in from Dame. He was not hitting the shots that they needed him to hit. 6 assists along with 2 rebounds to go with that. And that was just a very, very pitiful performance coming in from the Bucks. This was just not, I don't know what's up with the Bucks. I really don't. Actually, no, I do. Doc Rivers is their coach. It's just this is a very bad start for them. And it's no wonder that Giannis might want to get traded. And, might get traded. It's really no wonder that there's a possibility that he wants to force his way out. Possibility, we still don't know yet. But, Memphis, they opened up this game with a 40-point first quarter, and the Bucks really couldn't do anything else to respond after that. And then the Grizzlies followed it up with a 30-point second quarter, and then a 29-point third quarter. Meanwhile, the Bucks were only able to score at most 24 points in the first 3 quarters, at most. Again, not ideal. Not a very ideal situation. A big reason why they ended up scoring all those points was because of Antetokounmpo. And this is just really, really bad. This is a bad situation that the Bucks find themselves in. If Doc Rivers does not get fired anytime soon, I don't expect much change to happen. And they might get rid of Giannis, which will be a very, very bad thing. That's a very bad thing. That's something that should not even be in the possibilities, but it's going to happen. It could happen. The next game that I ended up getting wrong was the Dallas Mavericks beating the Houston Rockets. Houston ended up prevailing in this matchup 108-102. Dylan Brooks, he ended the game with 17 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. Jalen Green ended with 23 points, 12 rebounds, and Sengun ended with 17 points and also got 12 rebounds. So 2 players for Houston ended with a double-double in this matchup. And Tari Eason ended the game with 15 points off the bench, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. He shot 6 for 10 from the field, which is rather efficient. Jalen Green shot 9 for 21, but again, 23 points is 23 points. And Dylan Brooks shot 6 for 15, but recorded 17 points along with that. Jabari Smith shot 5 for 10 from the field, Jabari Smith Jr., and ended with 14 points, 1 of 5 from 3. But Fred VanVleet was not really all that good in this matchup. 2 for 13 from the field, 0 for 7 from 3 with 4 points. But that was enough to deal with the Dallas Mavericks, who had a very, very good performance, very solid performance actually, coming in from both Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. They both ended the game with 28 points or more. Luka Doncic ended with 29. Kyrie Irving ended with 28. Kyrie shot 10 for 20, 5 for 6 from 3. Luka shot 12 for 25, 29 points, 3 for 7 from 3. And Klay Thompson, he did not shoot the ball all that well in this matchup. 5 for 13 with 12 points and ended 2 of 9 from 3. If Klay Thompson would have ended up going shooting at least 4 for 9 from 3, the game would have been a lot closer, and in fact the game would have probably been sent into overtime. So this loss was, I don't want to really blame Klay Thompson for it, considering how Spencer Dinwiddie went 0 for 5. But again, this Klay Thompson performance is really not ideal when he is supposed to be a pretty solid shooter for the team, and that's the whole reason why they ended up signing him was to trying to get some solid 3-point shooting out of him. And so far it's been a little bit mediocre compared to Buddy Hield, who's been phenomenal at shooting the 3. So, a little bit, not really good news for Klay Thompson in that department and his case, but again, season is still young. And the Mavs, they usually, if we want to take last season into account, they usually start playing well after the All-Star break. But, season's still early, season's still young. They shot 10 for 30 from 3 as a team compared to Houston's 8 for 34 as a team shooting from 3. So the game was incredibly winnable. It really was if they would have just hit a couple more 3-pointers than them. But that was all she wrote in this matchup. Now, I already talked about the Spurs beating the Jazz. Now, the Suns, they ended up beating the Clippers as I expected. Despite the fact that the Suns did not have Bradley Beal in this matchup, they did have Devin Booker, who ended the game with 40 points, 5 rebounds, and 8 assists, along with 3 steals to go with that. This was a great game from Devin Booker. 11 for 18 from the field, 5 of 9 from 3. Kevin Durant was also pretty efficient. He did end with 18 points, but 7 for 13 from the field is very, very solid, along with 2 for 4 from 3. Royce O'Neal ended the game 7 of 8, 5 for 6 from 3, along with 21 points. Now, Ryan Dunn, 6 for 12, 4 of 9 from 3, along with 16 points. Nurkic ended the game with 11 points, 3 of 6 from the field, 1 of 2 from 3. And Grayson Allen, he's not really been all that good so far for the Suns. He's only averaging 4 points, and in this matchup, he shot 1 of 8 from the field and 0 for 5 from 3 with only 2 points. So they could have probably won by a little bit more against the Clippers had he shot the ball a little bit more efficiently. Now, on the Clippers side, they had a much more spread, I guess you could say, in terms of scorers, than the Phoenix Suns did, at least in the starting lineup. James Harden, he ended the game with a triple-double, 25 points, 10 rebounds, 13 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks along with that. Ivica Zubac, 22 points, 12 rebounds, so a double-double. Norman Powell, 23 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. And Derrick Jones Jr. ended with 11 points. And Ivica Zubac shot 90% from the field with the 22 points. Norman Powell ended up going 9 for 21 from the field, which isn't really all that good. And Harden ended up going 3 for 10 from the three-point line, which is not really that good either. Now, as a team, however, they did not shoot better than the Suns in this matchup. I mean, the Suns shot 18 for 39 from 3, which is 46%, compared to the Clippers shooting 12 for 35 from 3, which is only 34%. And I say only because, I mean, the disparity in efficiency between these two teams was staggering. Especially, and I didn't even bring up the field goal percentage. The Suns shot 51% from the field compared to the Clippers going 48% from the field. So it was a relatively close game. Really, the Clippers just needed to make a couple more three-pointers, as usually the case with a lot of these losses and a lot of the reasons why these teams end up losing. So that's all that I have to say about this matchup for tonight. For last night, excuse me. So we're going to go ahead and go into the predictions once again in the fifth segment, and we're going to talk about the games that are happening later on today, and I'll give my thoughts on which team is going to end up winning and which team is going to end up losing. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned. And we are back with the fifth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fifth segment, we are going to be talking about, we're going to be predicting the results of a lot of these games later on tonight, who I think is going to win, and, just my expectations for the night. And we'll see if I can actually get a perfect predictions for the first time in forever. I usually end up getting 2 wrong anyway. So today there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games that are going to be played, and most of them start at 7 o'clock, 7:30. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with the first one, which I think is going to be a relatively easy one. The Knicks matching up against the Pistons. I'm not going to talk much about that aside from the fact that the Pistons are one of the worst teams in the NBA, and I think the Knicks are going to easily beat them. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. Now, the Knicks, they aren't double-digit favorites. That's mainly because the Pistons are playing at home. Aside from that, I sort of expect the Knicks to beat them in the end of the day. Next matchup we have is the Bulls going up against the Brooklyn Nets. A rather, a little bit of an even matchup. Again, a little bit, only because of, the record difference isn't really all that much. But I think the Bulls are just a much better team overall than the Brooklyn Nets. Excuse me. Hiccups, excuse me. Even though the Nets play at home, I don't really have much confidence in the Nets being able to pull this one out. I expect the Chicago Bulls to end up winning in this matchup. They do have solid talent all around. And again, just off of the talent, Kobe White, Zach LaVine, Vucevic. I expect Kobe White to have a solid game against these Nets. They don't really have a solid perimeter defender, so I expect the Bulls to use that to their advantage. going into this game. Now, the Lakers, they're going up against the Raptors. The Raptors are playing at home. The Raptors, they do not have their best player, Scotty Barnes. So I feel like without that best player on the Raptors side, and considering how I expect the Raptors to end up tanking in this matchup, not just in this matchup, but further down the season, I expect the Lakers to prevail in this matchup and easily beat them. Not easily beat them, but I do expect them to play very well. I expect a big game from LeBron. I expect a big game from Anthony Davis. And last game that they ended up playing, they didn't really shoot the ball all that well. I expect that to change in this game and in this matchup. The Lakers, they desperately need a win, and I think that win is going to come against the Raptors here. Now, the Celtics, they're going to match up against the Hornets. Now, the Celtics, they ended up losing to the Pacers in overtime because Jaylen Brown missed a three-pointer, which isn't really like the worst way to lose, honestly, for the Celtics. The way I see it is just that Jaylen Brown missed an incredibly clutch shot. Nothing you can really do about it. It's most of the time it's like 50-50 the way I see it in those kind of situations. The ball either goes in, the ball doesn't go in. And I don't really think about three-point shooting percentage whenever it comes down to the final minutes. It's just whether it goes in or whether it doesn't. And that time it didn't end up going in. They did not end up forcing a double overtime. But aside from that, I think that the Hornets, they don't have enough firepower to compete against the Boston Celtics. Next, the Orlando Magic, they're going to be playing against the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is going to be a first-round rematch between these two teams. They played each other in the first round. Was one of the very few series that ended up going to 7 games. In fact, I think it was the only series that ended up going to 7 games No, it wasn't. The only first-round series, that ended up going to 7 games. And I expect the Cavs to end up winning in this matchup. They play at home, and the Orlando Magic don't have Paolo Banchero. So I think at first, trying to find that next offensive spark is not going to be easy for the Magic, especially going up against the best team in the Eastern Conference right now, in the Cavs. Yeah, the Cavs are the best team in the Eastern Conference right now, if we're going based off of team record, right? So I expect the Cavs to make this not necessarily light work, but considering how they don't have Paolo, it might actually be light work for this team. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. The Hawks are going to match up against the Kings. These two teams, I'd say, are pretty evenly matched. And I want to go with the Kings in this matchup. But something tells me that the Hawks, since they are 1 game below 500, they're going to end up prevailing in this game. I'm going to stick with my pick with the Kings. I think the Kings overall, they do have much more firepower than the Hawks do on the offensive side, and I don't really think the Hawks have much of have a solid defense to be able to stop most of their players. Yes, they do have Trae Young. The Hawks, they do have Trae Young. I expect Trae Young to be very solid in this matchup, but I don't think he's going to have much of an answer for De'Aaron Fox. And I don't think there's going to be many people that'll have an answer for DeMar in this matchup. It's really just down to whether or not DeMar can hit his shots. So I'm going to go with the Kings in this pick. Now, the Pacers, they are going up against the Pelicans. I am done picking the Pelicans. I'm going to pick the Pacers. I have a little bit more faith in the Pacers here in this matchup against the Pelicans, especially considering how they don't have DeJounte Murray. If they had DeJounte, I would have went ahead and picked the Pelicans. But since they don't, and since I'm trying to learn from my mistake from previously, I don't want to pick the Pelicans again and be rather stubborn. The Pelicans, they do play at home, but still, I'm going to stick with the Pacers on this one. Next, the Timberwolves are going up against the Denver Nuggets. I expect the Timberwolves to end up winning this game against Denver. The Nuggets, they're not really that as deadly as a team as they were years ago. And a big problem with that is the lack of spacing, in my opinion, and Russell Westbrook being on the floor. I think that how should I put this? I think that the matchup is going to be a little bit of a problem for the Denver Nuggets, because you see, there's the thing that that teams do whenever Westbrook is on the court. So, And the Timberwolves, I feel like they're going to excel at this. Now, the Timberwolves, they have very solid perimeter defenders, right? That's already known. But when Russell Westbrook is on the court and when Jokic is most likely not going to be on the court, I think what the Timberwolves are going to end up doing is they're going to end up putting Rudy Gobert in charge of guarding Russell Westbrook. They've done this before, and they've used this defensive strategy to try and slow Russell Westbrook down. Several other teams have done this as well. And it's been proven to be rather effective because Russell Westbrook would in turn take a couple more three-pointers and a couple long-distance shots that aren't really efficient for him to take. And I feel like the Timberwolves, they're going to use this to their advantage, and they're going to end up prevailing in this matchup against the Denver Nuggets. Now, when Jokic is on the floor, I feel like that's going to be a little bit iffy, on depending on whether or not Rudy Gobert is going to guard Jokic or not. But I will say that it will, if Russell Westbrook is also sharing the court with Jokic, double teaming on Nikola Jokic is going to be much more apparent and rather effective, considering how Rudy Gobert is already going to be one of the defenders that's going to be guarding Nikola Jokic. So that's my thought process. That's why I expect the Timberwolves to come out with this one. And then finally, the Thunder matching up against the Portland Trail Blazers. The Thunder are going to beat them. No real questions about that. I think the Thunder, they're going to continue being one of the only teams to not lose in the regular season so far. And there's not really, I don't think they have much of a matchup choice against the Trailblazers. Elliot Jameson. I'm the only one here, and you are absolutely right. I do need a haircut. And I mean, I like my hair. I like having a lot of hair. I have to savor it now, because when I get older, then chances are that my hair is probably going to start receding, and really don't need to. Yeah, all right, we're done talking to you now. So that's all that I have to say in this podcast, and that's all that I got to say for the show. So thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. No, I'm not going to shave my eyebrows. That's absolutely ridiculous. But again, as I said before, remember to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And as usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, something you've been dying to share, like Elliot Jameson in the chat. He loves you-know-what. I'm not going to say that, but yeah. That's all that I really have to say. Again, you can use Super Chat, or you can use the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. That's all that I really have to say in this segment. Again, with these politics, I really don't understand. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.